The Great Hall of the Interplanetary Council was an architectural marvel that seemed to defy physical laws. Suspended crystals reflecting the light of 1,000 stars created an atmosphere of ethereal beauty. Species from across the known galaxy mingled in a symphony of diplomacy that had maintained peace for over 3 centuries. Ambassador Elena Voss stood at the edge of the human delegation's platform, her shoulders straight beneath the formal diplomatic uniform. She was still not entirely comfortable with the weightlessness of the council chamber. But after 3 months of representing Earth, she had learned to maintain her composure despite the constant floating sensation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the assembly of alien representatives. "Still can't believe we're here," whispered her aide, a young diplomat who had never left Earth's solar system before this assignment. Elena nodded but remained focused on the proceedings. Humanity's admission to the Council had been controversial. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet with environmental conditions so harsh that it produced species considered dangerous by galactic standards. Humans were viewed with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. Their adaptability, resilience, and, most concerning to the Council, their military history, made many representatives uncomfortable. Thousands of kilometers away, in Earth's orbital command station, Rear Admiral Marcus Kane watched the Council proceedings through a secure feed. His weathered face remained impassive, but tension radiated from his powerful frame. The station hummed with activity around him. Officers and technicians monitoring the status of Earth's defensive fleet, a fleet that most Council species considered unnecessarily aggressive for a civilized society. "They're treating Ambassador Voss like she's made of glass," Kane muttered to his executive officer. 3 months, and they still seat us at the farthest platform. "Can you blame them, sir?" Commander Rajiv Singh replied. "The average Council world has been without internal conflict for millennia. We were bombing ourselves 2 decades ago." Kane grunted in acknowledgement, but didn't take his eyes off the feed. While Earth's politicians celebrated membership in the galactic community, the military remained vigilant. Humanity had learned the hard way that peace was a luxury that required constant readiness for war. The Council session had been proceeding with its usual methodical pace, discussing trade routes and scientific cooperation, when an unexpected commotion disrupted the carefully orchestrated diplomacy. A delegation Elena didn't recognize materialized on the emergency transmission platform, a circular area in the center of the chamber used only for urgent matters. The aliens were tall, with iridescent scales covering slender bodies. Their large, compound eyes reflected the chamber's light in fractal patterns. Elena recognized them from briefings as Qatar, a peaceful species known for their advances in organic architecture and environmental harmonization. But these Qatar didn't display their species' characteristic serenity. Their scales were dulled with stress, and their movements were jerky with panic. "We request emergency assistance." The Qatar representative's voice was translated through the Council's systems, but even the neutral tones of the translation couldn't mask the desperation. "Our star system is under attack by a nano-organic swarm. 3 of our colony worlds have already gone silent. Our home world will be reached within 14 planetary rotations." The Council chamber erupted in alarm. Species that had known nothing but peace for generations faced with the concept of an existential threat was like introducing fire to beings who had never felt heat. In the orbital command station, Kane leaned forward, his attention fully captured. "Get me everything we have on nano-organic swarms," he ordered, "and open a secure channel to Ambassador Voss." The High Elder of the Council, a being of pure energy contained within an ornate vessel, called for order. "Please explain the nature of this threat, Elder Jarin." The Qatar representative projected a holographic image into the center of the chamber. It showed what appeared to be a cloud of metallic dust consuming everything in its path: buildings, vegetation, even Qatar themselves breaking down into component materials. "They arrived without warning," Jarin explained, his voice breaking. "Microscopic machines that self-replicate using any available matter. They appear to be designed specifically to target organic compounds. Our scientists believe they are artificial, created as a weapon." "By whom?" asked a representative from the Martian Confederacy, a feline species known for their caution. Unknown, but they are approaching from the direction of the void expanse. A murmur ran through the assembly. The void expanse was an uncharted region of space that had resisted exploration due to unusual gravitational anomalies. "What defense measures have you attempted?" asked the representative from the Arcturian Commonwealth, a species that prided itself on technological advancement. "Everything within our capabilities," Jarin replied. "Energy shields cannot stop particles of this size. Our weapons pass through the swarm with minimal impact. We've evacuated what populations we could. But our homeworld has 9 billion inhabitants. We cannot possibly relocate them all in time." On Earth's command station, data was streaming across Kane's screens. "Sir," reported his science officer, "our records from first contact briefings indicate the Qatar have minimal military capabilities. Their technological development focused almost exclusively on environmental engineering and sustainable growth." Kane nodded grimly. "Peace-loving species with no enemies don't build warships." Back in the council chamber, Elena listened as the discussion quickly turned to evacuation strategies and containment protocols. Not a single representative had mentioned military intervention or destroying the threat. She activated her communication implant, a direct line to Earth's command. "Admiral Kane, are you monitoring this?" "Every word, Ambassador," came the immediate reply. "They're talking about running while this swarm devours an entire civilization." "The Council operates on consensus and non-intervention principles," Elena said quietly, her lips barely moving as she maintained diplomatic composure. "They'll prioritize containment over confrontation." "With all due respect to diplomatic protocol, Ambassador, containment is bullshit. This swarm will keep consuming until it's stopped." Elena couldn't disagree. She had spent enough time in the Council to understand its strengths and limitations. The ancient alliance had maintained peace through careful negotiation and mutual respect for sovereignty. But it had been generations since any member species had faced an existential threat requiring immediate military action. "I need to speak," she said, more to herself than to Kane. She activated her platform's request signal. The High Elder acknowledged her with a ripple of luminescence. "The representative from Earth wishes to address the Council." Elena stood, feeling the eyes of 100 different species upon her. "Honorable representatives," she began, her voice steady despite the tension knotting her stomach. "Earth extends its deepest sympathies to the Qatar people and pledges its full support." Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. "However," she continued, "I must express concern about the direction of our discussion. We are focusing exclusively on evacuation and containment. These are necessary measures, but they address the symptoms rather than the disease." The approving murmurs faded into uncomfortable silence. This nano-organic swarm represents an unprecedented threat to all life in this sector. It does not negotiate. It does not recognize boundaries. It simply consumes. If we allow it to devour the Qatar system, what guarantee do we have that it will not continue to spread? "What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Voss?" asked the Arcturian representative, a note of suspicion in his voice. "I am proposing that this is one of those rare instances where military intervention is not only justified, but necessary. Earth is prepared to offer its defensive capabilities to neutralize this threat." The chamber erupted in protest. Species that had evolved beyond physical conflict generations ago recoiled at the suggestion of deliberate warfare. "Order," called the High Elder. "Ambassador Voss, while we appreciate Earth's willingness to assist, your suggestion contradicts the Council's founding principles of non-aggression." "With respect, Elder," Elena pressed on. "These principles were established to prevent conflict between sentient species. This swarm is a weapon, artificial and programmed for destruction. The principles of non-aggression should not prevent us from defending innocent lives." "Even if what you say is true," countered the Martian representative, "Earth has been a member of this council for merely 3 months. Your species' history of warfare makes your eagerness to resort to military action concerning." Elena felt heat rise to her face but maintained her diplomatic composure. It is precisely because of our history that we understand the necessity of action. Humanity has learned that there are times when failure to confront aggression leads to greater suffering. In the command station, Kane watched with grim satisfaction. That's it, Ambassador. Make them face reality. The debate continued for hours, with various representatives raising objections to military intervention. Some cited the risk of escalation, others the violation of the Void Expanse's uncharted sovereignty. A few questioned whether Earth's military, untested in interstellar conflict, could even make a difference against a threat of this magnitude. Finally, the High Elder called for a formal vote. Elena watched with growing dismay as the holographic tally materialized in the center of the chamber. The Council had voted overwhelmingly in favor of a three-pronged approach: evacuation of the Qatar homeworld, containment of the affected region, and formation of a scientific committee to study the swarm. Military intervention was explicitly rejected. As the session adjourned, Elena made her way to the Qatar delegation. Elder Yarin's scales had dulled further, the light of hope diminishing in his compound eyes. "I am sorry, Elder," she said quietly. Earth's voice is still new in the council. "You were the only one who spoke of fighting," Yarin replied, his translator conveying the deep sadness in his harmonic language. "The others speak of evacuation as if our world is already lost." "The Council's decision is not necessarily Earth's decision," Elena said, choosing her words carefully. She glanced around to ensure they weren't being monitored too closely. "Would your people accept help offered outside official council channels?" A flicker of hope returned to Jarin's eyes. "You would risk your standing in the council. Some principles transcend politics. Elder, send a representative to Earth's diplomatic compound in 1 standard hour. We will discuss alternatives." As Elena returned to the Earth compound, her secure line to Kane activated. "I heard everything," the Admiral said before she could speak. "The Council has made a catastrophic mistake." "Can we do anything, realistically?" Elena asked, finally allowing her frustration to show now that she was in private. "We're talking about a threat in another star system. Earth has never deployed military forces that far. The Deathworld fleet wasn't built to sit in orbit looking pretty. Ambassador, we've been preparing for extraterrestrial threats since first contact. This may not be the invasion some of my predecessors feared, but the principle is the same. A hostile force threatening innocent lives." Elena lowered her voice further. "The Council explicitly rejected military intervention. If Earth acts unilaterally, we could be sanctioned or even expelled. With respect, Ambassador, that's your department. My concern is whether we can defeat this swarm before it wipes out 9 billion Qatar." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. Her diplomatic career had been built on following protocol and building consensus. What Kane was suggesting would violate every principle of her training. But then she remembered Jarin's eyes, the desperation of a species facing extinction. "If we do this," she said finally, "it needs to be decisive. We won't get a second chance." "Understood, Ambassador. I'll begin preparations immediately, but I'll need something from you." "What?" "A Qatar liaison with scientific knowledge of their system and the swarm's behavior, and official clearance to deploy, even if it's off the record." "I'll have both for you within 6 hours," Elena promised. When Jaren arrived at the Earth compound, Elena was waiting with a secure communication array and a confidentiality agreement. The elder Qatar brought with him a younger member of his species, Tirvik, a scientist who had directly observed the swarm on one of the outer colonies. "What you are proposing," Jaren said after Elena had outlined Earth's plan, "would violate the Council's decision." The Council voted to prioritize evacuation. Elena replied carefully, "We are not interfering with that effort. We are simply supplementing it with additional measures." "Military measures." "Protective measures," Elena corrected, though the distinction was largely semantic. Earth has experience with threats that cannot be reasoned with. Sometimes the only response to aggression is a decisive show of force. Jaren's compound eyes studied her for a long moment. Why would humans risk their standing for a species they barely know? Elena considered diplomatic platitudes but opted for honesty. Partly principle, we believe in defending the innocent. Partly pragmatism, if this swarm consumes your system, it may not stop there. And partly, she hesitated, because we need to prove something to ourselves and the galaxy. Prove what? That being evolved from a death world doesn't make us dangerous. It makes us necessary when death comes calling. After another moment of contemplation, Jardin nodded. My people accept your offer, Ambassador Voss. What do you require from us? Everything you know about the swarm, your system's defenses, and astronomical conditions, and Tirvik's expertise as liaison to our military command. You shall have it. May your warriors be as formidable as your reputation suggests. Within hours, Earth's orbital command station transformed from peacetime readiness to war footing. Kane assembled his senior staff in the secure strategic planning room, where holographic displays showed the Qatar system and the approaching swarm's trajectory. Ladies and gentlemen, Kane addressed the gathered officers. We are about to embark on humanity's first interstellar military operation. Our mission is simple in concept, but complex in execution. Stop a nano-organic swarm from consuming the Qatar homeworld and its 9 billion inhabitants. He gestured to Tirvik, who stood nervously among the human officers. Our Qatar liaison will provide scientific expertise on the threat. Dr. Li Mei from our Xenobiology division will head our countermeasures team. Dr. Li stepped forward, her intense gaze scanning the assembled officers. Based on preliminary data, we're dealing with a self-replicating nanomachine collective that specifically targets organic matter for conversion. It's artificial in origin, designed as either a weapon or a horribly misguided terraforming tool. She brought up microscopic images of the swarm particles. Each unit is smaller than a human cell but contains programming sophisticated enough to coordinate with billions of others. They can form structures, disassemble matter at the molecular level, and adapt to environmental changes. Can they be destroyed? Asked Commander Singh. Conventional weapons are largely ineffective, Dr. Li explained. Energy weapons disperse them temporarily but don't prevent reconstitution. Physical barriers are eventually consumed. However, she highlighted a section of data. We've identified 2 promising approaches. She nodded to Tirvik, who activated his own data display. The swarm operates through a quantum entanglement network, the Qatar scientist explained, his translator converting his harmonic speech. There appears to be a hierarchical command structure with central coordination nodes. If these nodes can be disabled, the swarm would lose cohesion. And the second approach, Kane prompted? Targeted nano-disruptors. Dr. Li continued. Essentially fighting fire with fire, deploying our own nanites programmed specifically to disable the swarm's units. The challenge is delivery and scale. We need to introduce enough disruptors into the swarm to create a cascading failure. Kane nodded grimly. We'll pursue both approaches simultaneously. Commander Singh will lead the strike force targeting the command nodes. Dr. Li, you'll work with our weapons division on deploying the nano-disruptors. He turned to the fleet commanders. The Deathworld fleet will deploy in 3 battle groups. First group will establish a defensive perimeter around the Qatar homeworld. Second group will engage the swarm's forward elements to slow their advance. Third group will support the strike teams targeting command nodes. One of the younger officers raised a hand. Sir, what about the Council's prohibition on military intervention? Kane's expression hardened. Our mission has been authorized through diplomatic channels. The political ramifications are Ambassador Voss's concern. Ours is to save the Qatar people and neutralize this threat. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Then, let's move. We have 12 days before the swarm reaches the Qatar homeworld. That gives us 8 days to deploy and implement our strategy. Humanity's first interstellar battle begins now. As the command staff dispersed to their duties, Kane approached Dr. Li and Tirvik. I need your teams working around the clock on those nano-disruptors. They may be our best shot if the command nodes are too well protected. We'll need access to Earth's classified weapons research, Dr. Lee said bluntly, particularly the chimeric nanite projects. Kane raised an eyebrow. Those programs are strictly theoretical and highly restricted. Not as theoretical as the official records indicate, Admiral. And if we're going up against an enemy that operates at the molecular level, we need every advantage. After a moment's consideration, Kane nodded. You'll have the clearances. Just make it work. As Kane turned to leave, Tyrvik's translator produced an unexpected question. Admiral, is it true that humans once used biological and chemical weapons against each other? Kane stopped, his back stiffening. He turned slowly to face the Qatar scientist. Yes, in our darkest hours. Why do you ask? Because the swarm behaves remarkably like some of your historical weapons, consuming, converting, spreading. To defeat it, we may need to understand the mindset that creates such things. A cold understanding passed between the human admiral and the alien scientist. You'll have access to those historical records as well. Tyrvik, some knowledge comes at a terrible price, but if it helps us save your people, the cost is justified. Over the next 6 days, Earth's military-industrial complex operated at a pace not seen since the last World War. The Deathworld fleet, 50 heavy combat vessels, and over 100 support ships, was outfitted with experimental weapon systems and deployed through the recently established jump corridor to the Qatar system. Special forces trained in zero-G and vacuum combat drilled constantly on boarding and infiltration tactics. Scientists worked without rest to produce enough nanodisruptors to affect a swarm that numbered in the trillions. In her diplomatic offices, Elena maintained the pretense that Earth was simply providing evacuation assistance. She fielded increasingly suspicious inquiries from other council representatives, particularly the Arcturian Commonwealth, whose long-range sensors had detected unusual activity in Earth's shipyards. I assure you, she told the Arcturian ambassador during a particularly tense meeting, Earth respects the Council's decision. We are merely ensuring that our evacuation vessels are adequately protected during their humanitarian mission. Protected by ships carrying experimental weapon systems, the Arcturian countered, his crystalline form pulsing with skepticism. Our intelligence suggests your Deathworld fleet is designed for offensive operations. Elena maintained her diplomatic smile. In human experience, the best defense is often a robust deterrent. The Qatar system borders the uncharted void expanse. We would be remiss not to prepare for unforeseen dangers. The Arcturian's crystalline form darkened, the equivalent of a human frown. The Council will be watching Earth's actions very carefully. Ambassador Voss. We welcomed your species despite reservations about your martial history. Do not make us regret that decision. As the diplomat departed, Elena's aide approached cautiously. The fleet has reached the staging area in the outer Qatar system. Admiral Kane requests a final authorization before engagement. Elena stared out at the artificial stars of the Council station. 3 months of careful diplomacy balanced against 9 billion lives. The choice was clear, even if the consequences would be severe. Tell Admiral Kane he has full authorization to engage with all necessary force, and may God help us all. The Deathworld fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the Qatar system, a formation of warships unlike anything this peaceful region of space had ever witnessed. While human vessels were smaller than those of many Council species, they bristled with weapon systems and carried the hard-earned lessons of Earth's long history of warfare. From the bridge of the flagship Thermopylae, Kane observed the tactical display with intense focus. The swarm had already consumed 2 outer planets of the system, converting all organic matter into more of itself. Its leading edge was now approaching the asteroid belt that separated the outer system from the inner planets. Forward scout vessels report contact with the swarm's outer boundary, reported his tactical officer. It's exactly as the Qatar described, a cloud of metallic particles moving with collective intelligence. Deploy sensor drones to map its full extent, Kane ordered, and prepare the first wave of nanodisruptor missiles. Let's see if Dr. Lee's countermeasures have any effect. The first engagement was purely experimental. a series of specialized missiles designed to disperse the nanodisruptors throughout a section of the swarm. The weapons detonated in precisely calculated patterns, releasing clouds of microscopic machines programmed to attack the swarm's units. On the Thermopylae bridge, Kane and his officers watched the sensor readings with cautious optimism. Where the nanodisruptors had been deployed, the swarm's density decreased by nearly 30%. "It's working," his science officer reported. "The disruptors are neutralizing the swarm units." "For now," Kane cautioned. "Watch for adaptation." Sure enough, within hours, the swarm began to change. New units appeared that seemed resistant to the first wave of disruptors. The affected areas began to reconstitute, though at a slower rate than before. "They're learning," Kane observed grimly. "Just as Dr. Lee predicted, we need to accelerate the second phase. Have the strike teams prepared for deployment in 6 hours." The Special Forces teams had trained for what was essentially a boarding action against an enemy with no ships. Using specially designed infiltration craft, they would penetrate deep into the swarm to locate and destroy the command nodes that Tirvik's analysis had identified. Commander Singh led the briefing for the strike teams. "Intelligence indicates 5 primary command nodes coordinating the swarm. Each team will target one node. Your craft are shielded against the swarm's corrosive effects, but these protections are temporary. You'll have approximately 40 minutes from insertion to extraction." A veteran sergeant raised her hand. "Sir, what exactly are we looking for? How do we identify these command nodes?" Singh nodded to Tirvik, who displayed a holographic model. "The nodes appear as crystalline structures approximately 2 meters in diameter. They emit a distinct quantum signature that your sensors can detect. They will be protected by the highest concentration of swarm units." "In other words," Singh added, "look for the place the enemy defends most fiercely. That's your target." As the strike teams made their final preparations, Kane received an unexpected communication from Elena. Her holographic image appeared in his private quarters, her expression grave. "The Council has detected our military presence," she reported without preamble. "The Arcturian representative has called for an emergency session to address Earth's violation of collective security protocols." Kane's jaw tightened. "How long can you stall them?" 24 hours at most. After that, we can expect a formal censure and possibly revocation of our jump corridor privileges. We could be stranded in the Qatar system. Then we'll have to work fast. The first strike teams deploy in 4 hours. If they can disable even 2 or 3 of the command nodes, it might disrupt the swarm enough for our nanodisruptors to finish the job. Elena's hologram flickered as she leaned closer. "Marcus, the Qatar are saying prayers for your fleet. Their cultural traditions don't include warfare, but they're performing rituals usually reserved for natural disasters." A grim smile touched Kane's weathered face. "Let's hope we live up to their faith, one way or another, Ambassador. History will remember what Earth did here." "Just make sure it's the right kind of history," Elena replied. "Voss out." The insertion craft resembled matte black arrowheads, designed to slip through the swarm with minimal resistance. Each carried a team of 6 Special Forces operators equipped with weapons specifically designed for this mission. Commander Singh led Alpha Team, targeting what intelligence suggested was the primary command node. As their craft accelerated toward the densest part of the swarm, he performed a final check of his nano-resistant combat suit. "Comms check," he ordered, and each team member responded in sequence. "Remember," he told his team, "this isn't like anything we've trained for. The enemy isn't thinking in human terms. It doesn't fear death or pain. It simply executes its programming. Our advantage is that we can think creatively. We can adapt faster than it can." The insertion was violent and disorienting. Though the craft's shields held against the swarm's attempts to disassemble it, the constant impacts created a turbulence that threatened to overwhelm the stabilization systems. "Approaching insertion point," announced the pilot, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Brace for deceleration." The craft slowed abruptly, coming to rest in what appeared to be a spherical cavity within the swarm, a bubble of empty space approximately 50 meters in diameter. At its center floated a crystalline structure pulsing with internal light. Command node confirmed. Singh reported back to the Thermopylae. Beginning insertion. The team exited their craft through the airlock, using maneuvering thrusters on their suits to navigate the zero-gravity environment. The walls of the cavity seethed with motion, billions of nanomachines moving in coordinated patterns. "They're aware of us," observed Lieutenant Park, the team's technical specialist. "The swarm density is increasing around the node." "Deploy countermeasures and proceed to the target," Singh ordered. The team activated devices that released clouds of nanodisruptors, creating a path through the increasingly aggressive swarm. They approached the command node cautiously, aware that their suit integrity was their only protection against molecular disassembly. "Sir," Park called, his voice tense. "The node is generating some kind of defensive field. Our disruptors aren't penetrating within 5 meters." Singh observed the phenomenon. The nanodisruptors simply vanished as they approached the crystalline structure. "Adjust to Plan B. Deploy the heap charges directly on the field boundary." HEAP, High-Energy Adaptive Penetrator, charges were a last-resort weapon, capable of punching through almost any known defensive system by adapting their energy signature to the specific resonance of the target. The team placed the charges in a precisely calculated pattern around the node's protective field. Singh synchronized the detonation sequence with his tactical computer. "Charges set, everyone back to minimum safe distance." The team retreated to their insertion craft, sealing the airlock just as Singh triggered the detonation. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but the visual effect was spectacular. A rippling sphere of energy that momentarily illuminated the entire cavity. When the energy dissipated, the command node was visibly damaged. Its crystalline structure fractured in multiple places. The swarm units surrounding it began to move erratically, like insects whose hive mind had been disrupted. "Target compromised," Singh reported, returning to extract. His communication was cut short as the swarm suddenly surged with renewed coordination. The walls of the cavity collapsed inward, billions of nanomachines converging on the damaged node and the human insertion craft. "Emergency launch," Singh ordered. "Get us out of here now." The craft's engines fired at maximum thrust, but the swarm had already attached itself to the hull. Warning lights flashed throughout the cabin as the nanomachines began to penetrate the outer shielding. "Hull integrity at 60% and dropping," the pilot reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. "We won't make it to the extraction point." Singh made a split-second decision. "Divert all power to forward shields and engines. We're going to punch through the densest part of the swarm and circle back to the fleet." "Sir, that's directly toward the second command node." Park objected. "We don't have enough countermeasures for another engagement." "We're not engaging," Singh replied grimly. "We're becoming the weapon. Pilot, set course for the second command node and prepare to overload the reactor on my mark." Understanding dawned on the team's faces. Without the need for words, they each confirmed their acceptance of the mission's new parameters. The insertion craft accelerated toward the second command node, its hull rapidly disintegrating under the swarm's assault. When they were less than a kilometer from their target, Singh gave his final order. "It's been an honor. For Earth and the Qatar, now." The pilot initiated the reactor overload sequence. In the final seconds before detonation, Singh sent a compressed data burst to the Thermopylae, containing everything they had learned about the command node's defenses. The craft's reactor detonation created a sphere of plasma hot enough to vaporize the command node and disrupt a significant portion of the surrounding swarm. Of the 6 strike teams deployed, only 3 returned to the fleet. But their sacrifice was not in vain. 4 of the 5 command nodes had been destroyed or severely damaged. On the Thermopylae's bridge, Kane received the final reports with solemn acknowledgement. "The swarm's coordination has dropped by 70%, his tactical officer reported. "It's still advancing toward the Qatar homeworld, but at less than half its previous speed. And the remaining command node, protected by the densest concentration of swarm units we've ever recorded. A conventional strike team wouldn't stand a chance." Kane studied the tactical display, weighing his options. The damaged swarm still outnumbered his fleet by billions to one. The nano-disruptors were becoming less effective as the swarm adapted, and now they had lost nearly half their special forces in the first wave of strikes. "Contact Dr. Lee," he ordered. "Tell her we need the Omega countermeasure." His executive officer paled slightly. "Sir, the Omega countermeasure hasn't been field tested. The potential for uncontrolled replication is exactly what we need right now." Kane finished for him. "This swarm adapts to every weapon we throw at it. We need something that adapts faster." Dr. Lee appeared on the bridge within minutes, her lab coat exchanged for a tactical uniform. "Admiral, the Omega countermeasure is ready for deployment, but I must emphasize the risks. We're essentially fighting a runaway nanite swarm with another potentially runaway nanite swarm. The difference being ours is programmed for self-termination after completing its objective." Kane responded, "Correct?" "In theory, but quantum entanglement at this scale has unpredictable properties. If the command sequences mutate..." Kane met her concerned gaze directly. "I understand the risk, Doctor, but we're out of alternatives. How soon can it be deployed?" "The delivery system is ready. We need only your final authorization." Kane turned to the tactical display once more. The swarm had regrouped around its remaining command node and was advancing toward the inner Qatar system again. 8 billion people were depending on the decisions he made in the next few minutes. "You have my authorization. Deploy the Omega countermeasure." The Omega countermeasure was the product of Earth's most classified weapons research, a synthetic biological agent merged with adaptive nanotechnology. Unlike conventional weapons, it was designed to evolve in response to its target, becoming increasingly lethal with each generation of replication. The delivery system was a swarm of microscopic drones that would disperse the agent throughout the enemy swarm, targeting the remaining command node. Once released, it would be beyond human control, a weapon that would either save the Qatar or create an even greater threat. As the deployment countdown began, Kane opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. "This is Admiral Kane. In approximately 5 minutes, we will deploy our final countermeasure against the swarm. All vessels are ordered to withdraw to minimum safe distance of 500,000 kilometers." He paused, aware that what he was about to say would be recorded for posterity, possibly as either humanity's finest hour or its greatest mistake. 3 months ago, Earth joined the galactic community with promises of peaceful cooperation. Today, we demonstrate that peace sometimes requires the willingness to fight when innocent lives are threatened. Whatever the outcome of this battle, let it be known that humans stand with the Qatar people in their darkest hour. The Omega countermeasure launched, a cloud of delivery drones that quickly disappeared into the vastness of the swarm. For several tense hours, there was no discernible effect. The swarm continued its advance toward the Qatar homeworld, its billions of components working with reduced but still deadly efficiency. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, sections of the swarm began to disperse. The coherent patterns of movement became erratic, then chaotic. Swarm units turned against each other, disassembling their neighbors in a cascade of self-destruction. "It's working," Dr. Lee reported, monitoring the data from her station. "The Omega countermeasure is replicating faster than the swarm can adapt. The command node is being systematically isolated from its component units." Kane allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. "Maintain safe distance and continue monitoring. I want confirmation of the command node's destruction before we declare victory." The process accelerated over the next 12 hours. The swarm, once a cohesive entity spanning thousands of kilometers, fragmented into isolated pockets that lost coordination and eventually dissolved into inert particles. Finally, sensors confirmed that the remaining command node had been completely disassembled by the Omega countermeasure. "Swarm neutralization confirmed," announced the tactical officer, fatigue evident in his voice after 36 hours of continuous operations. No signs of coordinated activity remaining. A cheer erupted across the bridge, quickly tempered by Kane's raised hand. "What about the Omega countermeasure, Doctor? Is it self-terminating as designed?" Dr. Lee studied her readings with intense concentration. Degradation patterns are consistent with programmed self-termination. Replication has ceased, and existing units are breaking down into harmless components. She looked up with visible relief. It worked, Admiral. The threat has been neutralized. Kane allowed himself a small smile. Send word to Ambassador Voss. The Qatar homeworld is secure. The victory came at a heavy cost. 17 Earth vessels had been destroyed, with over 2,000 personnel lost. The special forces teams that had struck the command nodes had suffered 50% casualties, but compared to the potential loss of 9 billion Qatar lives, the sacrifice was deemed acceptable. As the fleet regrouped and began recovery operations, Kane received a priority communication from Elena. Her hologram appeared on the bridge, her expression a complex mixture of relief and concern. The Council has called an emergency session to address Earth's rogue military action, she reported. We've been ordered to appear and explain our violation of the non-intervention mandate. Kane's jaw tightened. We just saved billions of lives. That should count for something. It might, Elena acknowledged, especially with the Qatar delegation supporting us. But prepare for significant diplomatic consequences. The Arcturian representative is leading a coalition calling for Earth's expulsion from the Council. When is the hearing? 48 hours. They're expecting you to appear alongside me to account for the military decisions. Kane nodded grimly. I'll be there, and I'll bring the data proving the swarm would have reached the Qatar homeworld if we hadn't intervened. Just be diplomatic. Marcus, we're already seen as dangerous. Try not to reinforce that perception. His weathered face softened slightly. I'll try to behave like a civilized being, Ambassador, but I won't apologize for doing what was necessary. 2 days later, Kane stood beside Elena on the Earth platform in the Council chamber. The atmosphere was tense, with representatives from dozens of species watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The High Elder called the session to order, its energy vessel pulsing with austere light. This emergency session has been convened to address Earth's unilateral military action in the Qatar system, in direct contravention of Council Resolution 7289. Ambassador Voss, Admiral Kane, you will now explain your actions. Elena stepped forward, her diplomatic training evident in her composed demeanor. Honorable Elder, esteemed representatives, Earth acknowledges that our military intervention exceeded the parameters established by the Council's resolution. We acted based on our assessment that the nano-organic swarm presented an imminent existential threat to the Qatar civilization, a threat that could not be adequately addressed through evacuation and containment alone. The Arcturian representative's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. This is precisely the behavior that many of us feared when Earth was admitted to the Council. Your species' history of warfare has clearly made violence your default response, even in a community that has maintained peace for centuries. Kane stepped forward, despite Elena's warning glance. With respect, Representative, when faced with a weapon designed for molecular disassembly of all organic life, violence is not a choice, but a necessity. The swarm was not a natural phenomenon or a sentient species with which we could negotiate. It was a weapon, and weapons must be neutralized. The chamber erupted in murmurs, some approving, others clearly disturbed by Kane's blunt assessment. The Mercian representative raised a graceful, clawed hand. While the Admiral's words are characteristically direct, they contain a truth we must consider. The data provided by Earth and the Qatar confirms that complete evacuation of the homeworld would have been impossible in the available timeframe. Billions would have perished. Then perhaps the appropriate response was enhanced evacuation efforts, countered another representative. The deployment of experimental weapons, including what Earth terms the Omega countermeasure, introduced unknown risks to the entire sector. Elder Jarin of the Qatar delegation rose from his platform, his scales now regaining some of their natural iridescence. The Qatar people wished to address the Council. The High Elder acknowledged him with a gesture of respect. The Council recognizes Elder Jarin. My people stand before you today because of Earth's intervention, Jarin began, his translator conveying the harmonic complexities of his native speech. When the Council voted for evacuation and containment, you effectively sacrificed our homeworld and billions of our people who could not possibly be relocated in time. His compound eyes swept the chamber. We do not blame the Council for this decision. Most species represented here have known peace for so long that the concept of necessary warfare has become foreign to you. But in your comfort, you forgot a fundamental truth: that peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but the protection of the innocent from harm. He turned toward the Earth delegation. Humans call their world a death world, a harsh environment that shaped a species capable of both great violence and great compassion. Today, we saw both. They unleashed weapons of terrible power. Yes, but they did so to save lives that would otherwise have been lost. The chamber fell silent as Jaren's words resonated through the translation systems. Even the most skeptical representatives seemed to be considering this perspective. The High Elder's energy vessel pulsed thoughtfully. The Council acknowledges the Qatar's gratitude. However, the principle at stake is whether any member may unilaterally override a Council decision based on their own assessment of a situation. Elena seized the opening. Perhaps what this situation reveals is not a flaw in Earth's adherence to Council principles, but a gap in the principles themselves. The Council's founding charter emphasizes non-aggression and peaceful resolution of conflicts. But it does not adequately address threats that are neither natural disasters nor traditional conflicts, synthetic weapons that target all life indiscriminately. She gestured to the tactical data displaying the swarm's projected path. Had this threat not been neutralized in the Qatar system, our models indicate it would eventually have spread to neighboring systems. The Council would have faced the same decision again, with even more lives at stake. The debate continued for hours, with various representatives raising objections, concerns, and occasionally support for Earth's actions. Kane remained stoically at attention beside Elena, intervening only when technical questions about the military operation were raised. Finally, the High Elder called for a vote on 3 separate resolutions: whether to censure Earth for its unilateral action, whether to establish new protocols for responding to non-sentient existential threats, and whether to recognize the Qatar system as a special administrative zone for recovery efforts. Elena and Kane watched as the votes were tallied in the center of the chamber. The results appeared as glowing symbols in the Council's universal script. Earth would receive a formal censure for violating Council procedure, but no expulsion or sanctions. New protocols would be established for rapid response to similar threats in the future, with provisions for limited military action when unanimously approved. And the Qatar system would receive priority assistance for recovery, with Earth playing a leading role due to its expertise in dealing with the nano-organic contamination. As the session adjourned, Elder Jaren approached the Earth delegation. "Your censure is a small price to pay for the salvation of my people, Ambassador Voss, Admiral Kane. The Qatar will remember Earth's courage when others counseled abandonment." Kane inclined his head respectfully. "Your people's gratitude is appreciated, Elder, but unnecessary. We did what any decent civilization would do when faced with the suffering of innocents." "Perhaps," Jaren replied, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in complex patterns. "But it was Earth that acted while others deliberated. There is a human expression I have learned recently that seems appropriate: deeds, not words." As the Qatar elder departed, Elena turned to Kane with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We got off lightly. The censure is a formality. It'll be forgotten within a few council sessions." "And the new military response protocols?" Kane asked. "A significant concession. The Council is acknowledging that sometimes force is necessary, even in their peaceful community. That's a paradigm shift we couldn't have achieved through normal diplomatic channels." Kane's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "So, our act of rebellion actually advanced your diplomatic agenda? Convenient." Elena matched his smile with one of her own. "I wouldn't go that far, Admiral. But perhaps it reminded everyone that peace isn't always maintained through passivity. Sometimes it requires those willing to stand against aggression, even if those defenders come from a death world. Especially then, perhaps that's our role in this galactic community: to remember what others have had the luxury to forget. As they prepared to return to Earth, news arrived that the Qatar had established a memorial on their homeworld, a monument depicting Earth vessels standing guard against a stylized representation of the swarm. The inscription, translated into multiple languages including human English, read simply, "When death came from the stars, Earth's children answered our cry." In the council chambers, the term Deathworlder continued to be used to describe humans and other species from harsh planetary environments. But now, in certain contexts, it carried a new connotation, not of primitive violence, but of necessary strength in a universe where threats to life could emerge from the darkness at any moment. Earth's censure would fade from diplomatic memory, but the lesson of the Qatar incident would endure. That true peace required not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of defenders willing to act when innocent lives hung in the balance. And in that role, Earth's children, shaped by their unforgiving world, had found their place among the stars.